Thank you all for joining today. It's great to have you with us for another installation of our webinar series. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about SaaS applications and backing up data from those applications in the cloud. A little bit about me. My name is Brian Laughlin. I'm a partner with Intelice Solutions. I've been with Intelice for roughly 14 years, or going on 15 years. Intelice Solutions is a managed services provider and IT consulting company in the DC metro area. We service clients all around the country and actually all around the world from that DC location. We've been implementing solutions for going on 21 years now that are innovative, comprehensive, and easy for our clients to use. A little bit about today. Really wanted to talk about how the challenges around as companies are increasingly moving their data to cloud-based applications. Many IT administrators think that the traditional best practices around data backups are no longer applicable, or they're outdated. SaaS applications are now, and SaaS, when I say that, is software as a service. SaaS applications are now always available. They're accessible from anywhere. They're highly redundant, and so the question is, well, why is a backup necessary? Isn't my SaaS vendor providing that capability for me? Kind of out of sight, out of mind now. And with more and more companies depending on applications like this, these cloud applications, these risks are pretty impossible to ignore. Best practices like data backups are just as important now in the cloud as they were with on-premise IT systems. The founder of our company always said, we can never lose data. We always have to have a backup. The backup is the most important thing. And with these changes we've had, that mantra has kind of changed, at least in the minds of a lot of IT administrators out there. But it's still that much more important, I'll say, to make sure that we have the information that's necessary and we have some of these backups. Independent data backups separated from the actual application itself oftentimes is necessary to make sure that we don't have any of these data loss pitfalls, if you will. Staggering stat, 1 in 3 companies that are using SaaS applications lose data. This was published earlier this year. That is absolutely scary from someone in my position, and should be scary for most companies out there. Some other stats, out of the data loss that was talked about, almost half of it is caused by users being able to or have deleted information. So with this move to the cloud, and I'll say the loss of control at some level for administrators and for owners within the company to be able to control that access and the power that their users have, there is the opportunity in many cases for users to be able to delete data that they didn't, at one point, they didn't have the opportunity to do. 13% of data loss is caused by hackers and viruses. If anybody's been watching the news over the last week, this is definitely the hackers and viruses portion of this is pretty real right now. The WannaCry virus, or malware, I should say, that got released last week is causing all sorts of stirs. It's now infected, as of yesterday, about 150 different countries around the world, and is affecting a lot of different businesses and users out there. Luckily, if you're prepared and have the right resources and protections in place, like we have for our clients, this is more of a communication type challenge than it is for anything else. But there is real risk associated with hackers and viruses and their capabilities to affect your data and your systems. Only about 7% of the data loss that was referenced is caused by malicious deletions, someone actually trying to do some harm to your business. In some ways, I feel like that's a very low stat. In other ways, I feel like that's an incredibly high stat. But there can be a lot of accidental, for example, accidental deletions, obviously, from this stat, which is also a little scary. And the other big piece is a lot of the data loss is caused by departing employees. I think we've all had some employees either leave at some point, or be terminated, and that can be a scary piece, that there is power within those departing employees to potentially delete certain things. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go into more detail around Office 365 specifically. So just to kind of summarize some of that information, overall cloud-based system vulnerabilities, there's a lot going on there. There's risk around ransomware and virus attacks. We have the capability of some accidental end user deletion, malicious attacks, some potential opportunity for data overwrites, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the next couple minutes. There is the potential for some lost data due to canceled account subscriptions. So what that's really referring to is when a account is canceled or a user is removed, what happens to the data that was associated with that user? Oftentimes that is removed, and that happens with a lot of the cloud-based systems. So where you have, you're subscribing to something, you're giving someone access to something, all of a sudden that person leaves or is terminated, and all the information assigned with that person, when you stop paying for that user, where does that information go? Definitely a really important question to ask, and something that you need to be aware of when you're subscribing to some of these systems. And then there's also the potential for misbehaving application workflows. So if an application has a specific process that it goes through, there is the potential to lose data in those scenarios. Speaking specifically around Office 365, there are some pretty relevant challenges associated with backing things up. So when I'm talking about Office 365, I'm really talking about the data storage around that. So we're talking about Exchange Online, or the email hosting associated with your account. We're talking about OneDrive, so your file, your document storage, which can be either specific to users, user accounts, or can be around the entire company, depending how it's set up. And then there's SharePoint, and SharePoint's the document repository that most people are familiar with at some level, and the document backup and retention around that application. So really we're talking about those three components as I'm kind of walking through these. The first area is around the overall permanent deletion. So for clarity, when a SharePoint administrator, for example, needs to delete a site collection, all the data that is associated with that site collection is put into a recycling bin. So anyone who is an administrator with SharePoint has probably seen this. When people delete things, it goes to a recycling bin. There's then another administrator recycling bin. And so there's retention on, I'll say, both of those recycle bins. When it gets into the, I'll say, administrator recycling bin, it basically sits there for about 93 days. At that time, it's automatically and permanently deleted. There is no rollback option. There is no way to restore that. There is no way to get that information back. So in those scenarios, you're going to be potentially losing that data. As one would expect with inactive licenses, for example, when an active Office 365 license is obviously required to access Office 365 data. However, when inactive or deprovisioned users and the information around that user data, when they're deactivated or deprovisioned, their information is lost, and what the trail of what they have done in the past is permanent deleted. There's not any rollback option with that. When restoring old files from SharePoint backup, the restore of that information, so for example, something's deleted, a file's deleted, it needs to be restored. When that file's restored, it actually goes to the same targeted URL. So what that means is it overwrites whatever data is currently in that site collection. So you're basically overwriting the data that's there, as opposed to overwriting it to a different area. So you don't have the capability of having both files. The other, I'll say, challenge when it comes to restoring things when working within Office 365 is the item level restore. So, for example, if someone clicks, holds Shift Delete, which is a permanently deleting an email or a file for that matter, that is gone. So, doing a backup or trying to restore from that, it's not a situation where we can call Bill Gates on his cell phone and go back 6 months to an email that someone deleted or permanently deleted and look to restore that. Obviously, backups of the environment are happening, and if there was some sort of critical issue within Office 365, it would be restored. However, doing an item level backup and restore, whether it's an email or a file or whatever, if someone is permanently deleting something, can bypass the recycling bin and can be lost if other structures aren't put in place to make sure that doesn't happen. And when something does happen and there is a request for a restore and the need to work with Microsoft's support directly to try and do these restores is often very time consuming, and there's no guarantee that it's going to result in a restored file or a restored email or something like that. So there have been instances we've worked with organizations to help try and restore this, and in some instances it was successful, in other instances it wasn't. So a little bit about one of the products, and we've worked with a number of them around backing up the Office 365 environments for clients. We've done hundreds of migrations and implementations to Office 365 over the last several years. And it's where the market is going. It's highly recommended, but there are, like I've already kind of talked about, there are risks, and just changes in your strategy that need to be addressed. We have found one of the products we've worked with is a product called Backupify. Backupify has been acquired by Datto. Datto's a big player in the industry, in the backup and restoration industry. And they have acquired Backupify as a product line. Backupify is licensed just on a user by user basis, just like Office 365 is. And what they offer is a backup service that backs up all of the documents and emails in Exchange, OneDrive, and SharePoint, like I said, for that per user price. They back up 3 times a day to all that information. So it's automatic and kind of runs through all those applications and the storage around those applications and backs it up to another cloud area, a hosted cloud application. You can also do on-demand backups within the product. So if you are doing a migration, an upgrade, or you need to have like an export of the data, for example, we have the capability to do that. It also, I'll say, have the ability to schedule backup notifications. So from a verification perspective, knowing whether it's for compliance reasons or just kind of peace of mind, having notifications about successful backups throughout the process, that is part of the functionality within the product. And the really kind of crazy thing or big thing from my perspective is that there's an unlimited amount of data storage from that's stored indefinitely. So you have an infinite retention policy, meaning in your email, if you have an email, it tracks every single email, whether it's been deleted or not. So if you need to go back 10 years, so 10 years from now, you got to go back and find an email that came in to a specific person, whether they're with the company or not, whether they're a current user or not, whether their email's been archived or not, you can go back and find that email and pull that information for your organization if you need it. You also can set retention policies to not if you don't like that, but you do have infinite retention of all that information, whether it's within the actual user mailboxes or it's not. And the same thing goes along with any of your documents that are in SharePoint, any of your documents that are in OneDrive. Little show of kind of the interface there to show the Backupify capabilities. You have the ability to schedule, obviously, these backups and then have the ability to restore them on demand. It's a portal interface, very, very easy to use, very simple to restore in the case that you need to. A little bit about the restore process. It's a little different. So it's pretty quick and easy to do a restoration. It's pretty much like a one-click restore process. You can restore the data without overwriting the existing files or the site collections targeted as that same URL. So you can restore to a different location, analyze the information, or try and find what you need to make sure that there haven't been changes, as opposed to restoring over the same data that's sitting there. There's item level restores, so you can actually go into the original format with the file and label structure is maintained in the backup. So you can actually go down to the specific file and restore that file, as opposed to having to restore the entire site collection or database and then go find the file after that restoration has happened. The time to restore is much better because you have the capability to restore that file directly, as opposed to, gigs and gigs and gigs of data. You also have the capability to retain all of the user data associated with inactive users. So when you deactivate a user, you can store all that information and you keep intact all that user information. When they access something, when they updated something, all that information continues to be tracked and continues to be stored, even though that user ID or that user has been removed from the system. There's no overwrites on the data, like I had mentioned, and there's a lot of really, really cool search capabilities to be able to find data quickly. Obviously, if we're talking about a long-term retention policy is unlimited, the search capabilities have to be pretty important to make sure that we can find the right information, we can get to the right information, and we can restore the right information as quickly and easily as possible. And the search capabilities are pretty strong. Another shot of the interface here from Backupify. You can see the breakdowns of backups, restores, and overall exports within the system. Again, we can set those up however you'd like them to. We're doing those 3 times daily backups of all that information, but we can also do scheduled backups and restores however necessary. A little bit more, I'll say specifically around the product and around the organization as a whole. They are very compliant with all of with many of the federal regulations. It is very focused towards maintaining all that compliancy, whether it be HIPAA, NIST, ISO, all that kind of stuff is all included in this. It is very secure. Has very secure built-in data encryption, and is making sure that is very much a part of the product. And additional information we can definitely provide around this area. It's a very hot topic as of right now, and is very important in where we're living right now, especially with the WannaCry outbreak that we did have. One of the other areas I think that makes the backup or separate backup system that much more important, with the potential for corruption or encryption of data. And so when you have a malware that is encrypting information during some sort of infection, depending on how users are set up to be with the cloud, with SharePoint or with OneDrive, you do also have the potential for infecting your storage that's in the cloud. So, for example, if you were to have your own file share on your PC, and you are connected to OneDrive or connected to SharePoint, and you're storing files that are being synced between your PC and the cloud, and your PC is then infected and your files are then encrypted, that encryption can flow into SharePoint or into the cloud as well. We've seen that a number of times. And the challenge with that is being able to restore those files appropriately if you don't have the right backup mechanism. So with that happening, whether it's corruption, where the file type is corrupted for whatever reason, or it's some sort of malware like CryptoLocker, like WannaCry, like 1,000 other ones out there, they can then encrypt that data that is on the company's SaaS system, which can be difficult to get back. So making sure we have that data is extremely important and have the capability to restore it. So that's pretty much what I have for everyone today. If you have any questions, concerns, issues, please reach out to me directly or reach out to our service desk if you're a client. We'd love to answer any questions you have or provide any further information at your request. If you'd like to follow us, here's some our social media from LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Love to communicate with you through that. I'd love to open the floor for any questions that anyone has.
Great work, Brian. So we do have a couple questions. First one is coming from Peter. Peter writes in, how do I change my backup service provider, or how do I get started with that?
So there are, I'll say, consult with us directly, depending on what your current provider is. Your current backup service provider could be, if you're talking specifically about Office 365, there are only a small number of players in that industry. We have migrated, we had worked with a previous vendor and actually moved many of our clients to a new vendor, the Datto Backupify product, based on a number of reasons. Some of those reasons are around the users. So depending on the different product offerings that are out there, some of them are based on basically backing up all or nothing of the environment. So most of them are user license based. However, if you're billed for all or nothing in terms of the users, right? So if you're paying X amount per user per month, you can't choose the users specifically that you want to back up for. So you're basically, if you have 200 users, you got to pay for 200, backup licenses, and you're backing up the entire environment throughout that process. Others, like this one, you can do more on a user per user basis. And so if there are some critical specific users, you want to make sure their data is protected from an email perspective, for example. We can do that on a per user basis and not necessarily back up everything for everyone. And so those types of things have required us to help some of our clients migrate from one system to another. It is a relatively simple process, but does need some thought and strategy that go into it. So I would encourage Peter to contact me directly. I'd be glad to walk through that process with him, depending on what product you're going from. If you're talking about actual backup of your servers, I'd encourage the same thing. We have a lot of options around that as well. Some around this product specifically, and then others obviously outside of that. So please contact us and we'd be glad to help.
Perfect. Hopefully that helps, Peter. The next question we have comes from James, and James writes in, what else can I do to protect my data besides backing it up?
That's a loaded question there, James. Obviously, making sure security policies are in place appropriately, making sure everything within your systems are patched and updated appropriately. There's a big, obviously, with this WannaCry outbreak that we've had over the last week, our industry has been very much flooded with concern from both the media sources and from clients and from just outside people trying to get more information. There's a lot of misinformation out there as well. But our strategy has always been, I'll say, multi-layered. One, you want to make sure that you have the appropriate security measures in place where you're protecting the data. So meaning within policies, with encryption, with firewalls, that kind of stuff. You want to make sure there's the protective layer there, and you're protecting all the sources of intrusion. So you're protecting your emails are being filtered appropriately. You're making sure your users can't click on something and go to a malicious website. You want to make sure you have the most up-to-date virus scanning software and anti-malware software. Sometimes those can be two different things. So you may have a really good virus scanning software on your machine, but it may not protect you from ransomware. So you want to make sure you have all those protections in place. And then obviously the big thing, in the case that something does get in, which nothing's 100%, right? So anything, there can be the opportunity for something still to infect you as a company or somehow affect one of your users. You always want to make sure you can identify it, and then you can, in the worst case scenario, you can restore from some sort of backup like we've been talking about. So putting those measures in place, like I said, that multi-tier approach has been very successful for us. We have not had one client infected with WannaCry. We are very confident that the measures we have in place, I'll say they've been confirmed that we have a good strategy, and then continuing moving forward, making sure we're addressing any changes to that strategy as potential other threats present themselves. But this specific challenge has been more, say, industry-wide and media-driven than it has been affecting our business and our clients. All of our clients have been able to work and have not been affected from any of this malware. So we're pretty excited about that. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I'd put my contact information back up there. Feel free to give me a call or hit me on my email, or you can always contact us on social media as well. Any of through Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter to ask any questions or get in touch with us as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.